Hello everyone, this is Mike again.
Excellent. Okay, everything's working fine, so I'm going to close that. And I think we can begin now. So hi everyone, this stream is going to be about what you can hopefully see on my screen here. Actually, we're going to be using Construct 2. Construct 3 is the newer version that works through your browser. I'm still using Construct 2, which you can still get if you go to skira.com. I will post the link in the chat. Oops, I should have left the Twitch page open, I guess. I'll do that right now. Let's see. And I should say with me again today is Michael Ness.
Hello everyone.
He is sort of my real-time guinea pig to make sure that as I explain things, I don't neglect to say something that I should. So Mike has never used Construct 2 before. So if any questions pop up in your mind while I'm explaining things, please do interrupt with your question. So here's my channel. Okay, so I'm pasting this URL in here, and you can see if I scroll to the bottom of the screen, there's the download link for the latest stable release. When you download that gives you the free version, which is you should be able to follow along completely with this first part of the stream, which is just going to cover the basic. Oops, I'm causing an annoying echo. I just realized there I muted myself on this. Okay, so anyway, yes, you should be able to use the free version, which last I knew the limit is you can use 100 events, which is how you sort of code things in Construct 2. And you're limited to, I think, using 4 on-screen layers visually. But yeah, everything I'm going to be doing in this first part, explaining Construct 2, you should be able to do with this free version that you can get here. So here, let me paste that in finally. Oops, I did already. Okay, so anyway, there we go. Okay, so I can close this now. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to have to, let's see, open up Construct 2. Alright, so here's how it starts. Can you still see my screen fine, Mike?
I can, yes.
Okay. So here's how it starts when you boot it up, and the first thing you're going to want to do is start a new project. And a new empty project is fine. The first thing you're going to want to likely do is figure out what your sort of window or screen resolution should be for whatever platform you're aiming for. Excuse me. In other words, like if you want to make a fairly modern high-res game, something like 1920 by, what is it, 1080? Is that standard?
No.
Yeah, would be a good idea, but I'm just going to leave it as is. Yep.
What platforms are supported in Construct?
Very good question. Okay, so it's only a sort of direct export is to HTML5. That's what it actually creates. But using technology that I think is called wrappers, which is built on, last I knew, built on the open source. I think it's the Chrome browser support for HTML5. It basically you can create a standalone executable that can work for Windows, Linux, Mac, and also Android and iOS.
Very cool.
Yeah. So I think
Alright.
there's even support, or mostly support, I have to double check on that, but for Xbox One. Um, so, but the other ones are a definite. Xbox One, I know it was being worked on last I checked, but I haven't checked if you can make and release or sell an Xbox One game yet made with it. But
Sure.
yeah, it's at the very least it's in the works if it's not already fully functional and available.
Very cool.
So yeah, and it runs very well. It supports the hardware acceleration through, I guess, OpenGL. So it runs very well. Pardon me. So anyway, so we start with a new project, and as you can see, we have two tabs when you create a new project. One that's called Layout and one that's Event Sheet. And the layout is where you actually add your different graphical elements and things like that, and would actually sort of map out your, for example, if you a layout. What am I trying to say? A level for a game or a splash screen. Hold on, I have to clear my throat again. Sorry, everyone, I'm a little under the weather. So if you just double click anywhere in the sort of open canvas area, you're going to get all of your options for things that you can add. And very often one of the first things you're going to want to add is a standard Construct2 sprite. Those would be your actual moving objects. And as soon as you click again in the canvas, you're given this editor, and you can actually draw something or import with these little icons here. You can import graphics that you've previously made, including sequential images to create animations. I don't have anything pre-prepared, so I'm just going to scribble out something, and this is going to be pretty big. By default, the sort of sprite size is 250 by 250 pixel, which is
Wow.
pretty darn big. So we'll make it something much smaller, like 64 by 64, and then I can hold and control, and the mouse wheel will let me zoom in and out, as will these little icons, of course. And I'm just going to very quickly just get something on the screen. We'll do a classic spaceship styles shoot 'em up. So I'll just do a silhouette of some kind of slightly R-type style spaceship and flood fill. We'll give it a little turquoise cockpit. Why not? I should start talking like Bob Ross when I do the graphical.
Yes.
element.
Happy little trees.
Well, let's give him a happy little booster rocket.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Love Bob Ross.
All right, so that's good enough for what we're doing. And then right here is where you would add the sort of hotspots. The default one is the origin. So, for example, if you tell Construct2 in the events later to put the ship at a very specific pixel coordinate, this is where it's the anchor where it's going to use to place the ship, and it defaults to the center. And then this is pretty cool. This little option here is the collision polygon. So it starts with just 4 points. So you can control to a very nice level exactly what part of every frame of every sprite's animation you want to actually be collidable. And if you right click, you can choose, I just right clicked on one of the nodes, and I can add as many points as I want to really get a very specific shape, depending on how accurate I want the collisions to be.
That's cool.
Yeah, and you can have it autocomplete, or sort of auto guess, and let's see, it's been a long time. How do you do that? Guess polygon shape, there we go. And So anyway, this really helps. Like you don't want, especially in like a Japanese style shmup like R-Type or Gradius or something, you don't want every last pixel of your ship to be collidable. You want a much smaller area so that you don't get these really cheap deaths where something, barely grazes the very edge of a wing and you die from it. So,
Right.
so that's really handy. All right, so I'm just going to close that. I miss the days of OK buttons. Like it always feels like I'm sort of canceling out when I close something.
That's the truth, man.
Yeah. So anyway, so as you can see now I have my sprite in there. And so now, obviously I could sort of, wherever I leave it is where it's going to start when I run the game or that level. And then now that I have it out there, I could even do things like stretch it and rotate it. And this is really cool when you're creating sort of background elements or even enemies or something, because every last instance, let me see if holding control and clicking and dragging works. Yep, so if I hold control and left click and drag, I can create another instance of this thing now.
Oh, cool.
But what's cool is every last element or every last aspect of this thing that I can change, like its current scale, its rotation angle, whether or not it's flipped, for example, I could just go like this and reverse it. All of this stuff, including the other stuff I'm going to show you in a moment in its properties, it's for each individual instance you create.
Oh,
So
cool.
like, let's say you created a few sprites that represented like rock face, like different combination of rocks. You could create an entire environment with one image or one sprite, but several instances of it, and place them and scale them and rotate them and flip them to get a very organic looking level made out of one image that's been turned into several instances of a sprite, where each instance is you could even do tinting effects, which I'll show later, so you could even further get even more mileage out of that one image by making some of the groupings of stone darker or lighter or tinted toward a different color hue. So it's very handy. All right, so now that we have this in there, let's get into its properties a bit. It's always a good idea to name things carefully as you go. You don't want everything to be named like sprite underscore 420 by the time you excuse me. And then so if I click here on this tab that says layers, I can add layers, which is great for adding layers for parallax scrolling, or one great thing to do is add a layer dedicated to your HUD or UI, so that and I'm going to go into that a little bit in the future very soon, because there's a really cool feature that really helps save time setting up, like if you're going to be setting up a lot of levels for your game, you can actually make a layer global, so that anytime in any of your layouts you add a layer and name it that, it will refer to the original layer you created with that name. So like if you very carefully set up your HUD layer with lots of different sprites and maybe text objects to give all the player information, you don't have to worry about having that layer reset up for in every layout.
Oh, cool.
Which, I mean, that in some other programs that could be really time consuming. You had to have a copy of it, like manually copy it or create a clone of it for every level or layout. And then if you decided to edit it, you'd have to go back and hand fix it for every level you made. So that's really handy. So I'll show that soon. And then another really cool thing is for each object, you can create instance variables. And an instance variable is not only a variables for that particular object, so we're just going to add one in this case called hit points, and keep it numerical, and say you can take 3 hits, for example, at first. Click OK. And now that easily we've got hit points set up for this player ship, And now think about, obviously, if I was creating enemies, I could create my one enemy sprite with its animations, and I'm going to show you behavior soon, which is really cool. You can give them specific behaviors, but because each instance right from the get-go in the editor, you can change those values. You can actually have some enemies, you could like tint that specific one a different color, give it more or less hit points, and change some variables which you can sort of use to affect how it will behave.
Yeah.
So very, very powerful, very easy to just get a lot of mileage very quickly out of very little work and very little art to keep things optimized, not only for workflow, but obviously for the final game's sort of memory footprint, how long it will take to download,
Right.
and all of that, and performance on mobile devices. So anyway, so we've got that. We've given it a variable. I'll just close that now, and here you'll see behaviors. Is the screen update keeping up okay for you?
It is. Looks great.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to go into behaviors, click that. Now we're going to add a behavior, and as you can see, there's lots of different behaviors you can give something, including bullet, which we'll be using soon. And the one we want right now is, I forget, it's probably called something like 8 direction. Yep, there we go, 8 direction movement. So I click add, and now you'll see I have a behavior called 8 direction with its default parameters, including its default control, which is yes, which I think should be set to the arrow keys on the keyboard by default. And then set angle, this is an important one. On a side-scrolling ship, you don't want the ship to be rotating to keep up with the direction that it's facing. So I will just run this right now so you can see. So here it is running, and
it goes wherever you I see.
So it's nice and smooth, it's very cool, but it's not what we want for the player ship. So I will close this, and then all I have to do is go into its parameters and change set angle to no. And now if we run it again, now it stays facing the direction that you typically want for an R-type style game.
That looks much better, yeah. Was there an option to change like how quickly it moved?
There sure is. So all I need to do whenever I want to edit the properties of the player ship is click on it. That'll bring up its properties here, and if you'll see under 8 direction behavior, I have max speed, acceleration, deceleration, and then we can even let's see. So another cool thing that we can do, so let's increase the max speed, we'll say 350, and increase its acceleration, and then leave the deceleration. So you can really get something with it. Like if you wanted to simulate a very heavy ship, with a lot of inertia, then you could reduce the deceleration, and then when I let go of the key that's moving it, it should really take a long time. Yeah, like I'm letting go now, and it's
I see that
to a very nice stop.
That's really cool.
Really get you killed a lot in an R-type style.
Yeah.
But
it would.
We'll just bring that back to something like 500. But anyway, so as you can see, you can really play with that very quickly to get the perfect feeling of control for your character. Hold on 1 second, I'll be right back, everybody. Sorry for this. I'm back.
Welcome back.
So anyway, so now that we've got the player ship going, this will be cool. So if you remember back in here in this editor, you can alter its anchor point right there, but you can see under this little pop-up, or this little box here, you can add additional points. So one thing that's really cool And if you double click, you can name them. So we'll call this shot 1. So I can really carefully tell the game exactly where we want each shot or bullet or laser to come out, and we can
neat.
have multiple. And remember, this can be for every last frame of every animation can be set separately. So for example, there we go. Go ahead. Did you have a question?
Can those be used to do rotations or anything like around other points of the image, or have you not tried that?
Yes, it's default point. It is definitely there we go. So the one called origin is where it would always rotate around.
Okay.
I don't think you can on the fly change it to rotate around one of the other points. I've never tried that, but I'm pretty sure you could change the origin point whenever you want. So,
cool.
Which would give you almost the same effect.
Yeah, it would.
All right, so there's that. So now we have the origin point, and now we have 2 places for the shot to come out of. Actually, I'm going to rename this shot 3, this shot 2. And add a shot 1 so that we can have one coming right out of the nose. I wonder if I can change the order with... No, it doesn't look it. That's okay. So shot 1 will be right out of the nose. There we go. So I'm going to close that again. And so now let's make the player able to shoot. So I will just double click again and add another sprite. Click in there, and this would be an absolutely massive whale of a shot. It would be 250 by 250, so we're going to make that drastically smaller. We'll make it something like 8 by 4 pixels. Apply, zoom in, and this won't be pretty, but it'll get the point across. There we go. And you can set your... I certainly don't recommend doing your graphics in Construct 2. You should use a nice dedicated program for your graphics, but especially when you're just starting getting the game engine to work, using it to create your placeholder art obviously is fine and very convenient. Yeah. But anyway, so there's a little shot, maybe too little, but that's good for now. And what's interesting is if I take the very initial instance of something that I create, and you see how I scaled it up there?
Yeah.
So if I go into its properties, let's see, we're going to give it a behavior. So you saw, I think, that this sprite behavior, let's close that out, there we go. So every object I click on, let's see, how is this working? All right, so behaviors, there we go. So we're going to give this a bullet behavior. And what's cool is it's got gravity, so you could actually make something that behaves very much like an archer's arrow or a thrown rock or a hand grenade, simply by adding gravity to it. And but we don't need to do that for a shmup type shot. Bounce off solids, no, that's another cool one. You can have a shot that bounces off the walls and ceilings, like in Gradius. Set angle, yes, we'll leave that as true. And then initial state enabled. All right, that's all fine. We're going to add another. Let's see, which behavior should I add? Excuse me. Actually, that'll be it for now. So that's all. All right, so it's got its bullet behavior. Actually, no, is there? I think there's a way you can set it to automatically destroy if it exits the screen, but it's been a while since I used that particular thing or dealt with it, so I could be mistaken. Let's see. Destroy outside layout. There we go. So now if that shot at least goes outside the entire layout, it'll be destroyed automatically, so you don't have to worry about keeping track of and destroying them by hand. Okay, so that's fine. And so you'll see that we now have another behavior called destroy outside layout, but there are no properties to set for that. It's just automatic. unlike bullet speed and the 8-direction movement, which there's more options. But anyway, so now because this is already outside of the layout, it should destroy as soon as I run the level. So now we're going to get into events. You'll see that when I started my new project, it gave me a layout 1 and event sheet 1. And if I click on the tab for layout, its properties are here, and you'll see that its event sheet is set by default to be event sheet 1. So this is where you set up your level, and then this is where you set up your logic for the level. And it's called events in Construct 2, and it's based on the same exact idea of sort of if-then lines in basic programming language. The event is something or a series of things being true, like is something colliding with something else, for example, or you could have an entire set of conditions, they're called. So we're just going to add an event. I can click there to add an event, and then I know what I have to do. I forgot. Let's go back into the layout, and it doesn't have a lot of stuff when you just start sort of installed, so that in case you don't need it, it's not going to be wasting file size and memory. So we need to we can add gamepad support, we can add keyboard support, so I will add keyboard support. So there we go. So now when I go back to the event sheet, click add event, now I have keyboard here.
Okay.
So now I can double click keyboard, and I can say on key pressed. I'll double click that, and then I click here to choose what key, and I can just press a key. In this case I'll use the Z key, or Z for those non-Americans.
Nice.
And click OK. So now it says, as you can see in the event sheet, we now have one event, which is keyboard on Z pressed, and now we can add an action. So if this is true, then we add an action, and we're going to choose the player sprite, and we're going to find spawn another object, and we're going to choose the object, which will be the sprite. I'll rename that later. In the same layer, we only have one layer right now anyway, and then image point. So I think it was the third image point that I had set. We might even be able to do it by name, so I might be able to do this. Let's see if this works actually. And let me make sure I have that name exactly correct. Shot 1, no uppercase, okay. So let me go back to the event sheet. Shot 1, done. Okay, so now if I run this, every time I press the Z key, it comes out from the nose.
That's pretty slick.
Screen, and it's there we go. So obviously for a it feels like the shots are moving too slowly. So we're gonna bring that speed. We'll double the speed, and I don't know if you noticed, but the shots were all coming out the same exact size as this initial instance that I had created.
Yeah.
So that's important to keep in mind. Wherever your first instance is in the layout, then if you create a new version, it'll copy those properties.
Huh.
So we'll make that a bit smaller and faster. So now you'll see they're all that size, and they're all twice as fast now.
Very nice.
And it really does have a very nice feeling of inertia. It still has too much because I have to set the deceleration higher still, but it feels so much nicer than like like a crappy engine might have it just set to go at a very specific speed right from the beginning and have no deceleration at all.
Right.
So it definitely feels very professional and very nice. So
when it spawns objects, do those objects have names associated with them, or can you refer to them in some other way? Like if you wanted, like say, one of those bullet sprites to do something different than the others.
Mm-hmm. So the way you would sort of classify or sort of create subgroups of shots is to give it an instance variable, or at least this is how I would do it.
Okay.
So, like for example, I could give it an instance variable called type, or not typer, type, and you could even make this a text variable. So, for example, we could call this one initial value. We can say, for example, let's see, exploder. All right, click OK. So now, and this is only if you want something, if you want them, many different behaviors to all be in one shot that uses those particular images or animations or something. Because another cool way you could handle this, the way I would tend to do this, is I would create what's called a family, which is really cool. Right now there's no families. But let's say let me right click this and I'll clone an object type. So now I have a new kind of shot, which I'll make bigger at the beginning. And we will just quickly change its color so we can see very easily which one we're talking about. So now we have pea soup. All right, so now we have another colored shot and it's bigger, and we'll call it, all right, shot 2 is fine. So now I could go into projects, right click on the families folder, choose add family, and then I can add both shots to this family. So now what's cool is if you click on any of these, or if you click on actually the family, family 1, I'll double click to rename it. Rename player shots. So now I have a family called player shots, which includes both of these, and I can now add instance variables to the family instead of to each specific object that they all share.
Oh,
but
cool.
then you can set each of those variables either identically across the entire family, or of course not only each member of the family but each instance of that member of the family. You can hand set that particular value, such as damage it does, or movement. Like you could sort of, and like their properties within their behaviors. You could give them different acceleration, deceleration, gravity, things of that sort. So I hope that makes sense so far. And then in your logic, all right, this will be pretty cool. So now we don't need that instance variable since we're doing it this sort of more elegant way. So let's see, instance variables. Oh, no, that's not it. Let's see. Oh, that's it there. Okay, so type, I'm going to get rid of that and do the same here. Just because it's a really bad habit to create instance variables and then decide you don't want them but not delete them. Eventually you end up with a bunch of instance variables that you never use that are confusing when you're trying to debug.
I suppose.
Yeah, so we'll just quickly get rid of those. Oops. Okay, so now we've got two different sprites, but they're in the same family. And let us now give, what was I going to do this? Okay, so now we're going to give the family an instance variable. By clicking on the family here, its properties come up, and then we can add family instance variables. So we're going to click that, and we're going to do damage points. So this is how much damage it will do to the enemies, and we'll keep it number, and we'll make it by default, we'll say 4. Completely arbitrary, but why not? And now you'll see if I click on any one of these sprites that are in that family, you'll see its instance variables. It has damage points in there. So now we'll make this big red shot do twice as much damage by changing that to 8, and this is still 4.
Yeah.
So now in events, okay, we're going to need to add an enemy, so I'm just going to very quickly add something that we can blow up, right? So again, this is going to be huge. So we'll make this 64 by 64 as well. And make some goofy fake Space Invaders style enemy.
Very nice.
There we go. If you don't want to blow this guy up, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I know. It looks very evil.
There we go. Alright, so now we have an enemy. And to make him more interesting, let's just add a behavior. And we're going to give him a sine wave behavior. And by default, it's set to a horizontal sine wave. We'll make it vertical. And then period is how much time it takes to do one, I don't know what you would call that, one sort of wave in the sine wave, one, from top to bottom.
Right.
I don't know what to call it. I guess
what
period.
is the term?
Period,
yeah, right,
I guess, is the actual
period.
word.
I think it is.
And then you can make it. You can randomize the offset and the size of the period.
Sure.
So some cool stuff. And then magnitude is, I think that's in pixels. So 50 pixels up and down. That'll be quite high. And then even the magnitude can be randomized a bit, so you can give it some very organic looking behavior that way. And we're going to double click in here and name it enemy 1. Alright, so now we have someone that, and let's give him some hit points. That's important. So instance variable hit points, and then we'll give him 30 hit points. Why not? There we go. So now, we need to make it so that you can actually shoot that red shot. All right. So we'll map that to a different key. And if I click this whole event, I can Control C, Control V to copy that. And now if I double click here, I can quickly switch keys. So we'll make that X. And then I can double click that and change which object I'm creating. And just like that, I now have another weapon mapped. And let me change which point it's coming from. We'll make that come from shot 2. So now we have Z key shooting that and X key shooting that. And as you can see, they're coming from 2 different spots.
That's really
and
cute.
The enemy is doing so you can see how fast you can create a nice game. So now what we're going to do is actually, one thing I should definitely do, make sure you save often. Constructive is incredibly stable. I've never had it crash on me ever, but your power could go out, all kinds of things could happen. So I always choose save a single file. If you save as a project, it'll save it as a folder with all of its subfolders and stuff in there, so you can really see how it saves the data. And if you're some kind of hacker, you can go in there and manually edit stuff in the actual sort of component files, but there's never really a need to do that. So I just choose save a single file. And all right, so let's see, we will call this shmup. All right, so there's that. And then I still have Twitch going for no good reason. That's all right. I might need to paste in another URL at some point. Okay, so now that we have that going, let's go back to the event sheet. And another nice thing that we can do, if we right click here, we can choose add group. So I'm going to call this controls. And now we can drag this and this here. So now I can minimize, and you can also turn on and off groups of events based on situations in the game. So if your player's dead or the game is paused, you can sort of deactivate the controls group. So that's another nice way you can optimize.
That is really neat.
Yeah, and what's really cool is, well, I'll show you soon. There's for any event, you can create as many sub-events as you want. So once your game logic is getting more and more complicated, that can just be a very sort of optimized way to control your events. So you could have, if in general, the player collides with any enemy, like in a family of enemies, you could then have sub-events that check, well, is the player invulnerable right now or not, or what's the current situation of the player, what's the current situation of that particular enemy, and you can narrow things down so that one initial event, the sort of parent event that checks for a collision, has all of these sub-variations that now it checks, okay, well, is this true? Then do this. If this other thing is true, then do this other thing. So it's really a very nice way to handle things. All right, so I'm going to add a new group called Destroy Enemies. And now we're going to add an event. And we are going to check for collisions between player shots and enemy one. So player shots, look for collision or overlap. Okay, on collision with another object. And then we're going to choose enemy one. And of course we could have done the same thing with families as we did with the shots. We could have a family called enemies with a family variable called hit points, so we can control the code for all enemies getting hit with just one family that all enemies that can get hit are inside of.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're checking for collision between player shots and enemy. So now what we're going to do is we're going to subtract from instance variable, and we're going to leave it at hit points, and we're going to remove, not one, we're going to retrieve from that particular player shot that just collided, which it knows automatically we're talking about that, because we did a collision check for player shots. So from that particular player shot sprite, whatever it is, whichever one it is, whichever instance it is that collided, it's going to specifically check its damage points value, and subtract it from that particular enemy's hit points.
Awesome.
So just like that, we are now subtracting, and we're going to add a second action, which is going to destroy, destroy that player shot. So now, both the red and the blue shot will disappear when it hits the enemy, as you can see. There we go.
Yep.
But nothing is happening yet to the enemy because we haven't done something to make that happen. So I'm going to
you gotta create an action when he runs out of hit points or something, right?
Exactly. So yeah, I'm going to drag that into that. And all right, so now we are going to just check our enemy and compare its instance variable. And of course, this is really important for beginners. The instinct might be to check if the hit points are equal to 0. But it very well could happen that the shot that will kill him might have instantly brought his hit points to a negative number. So make sure you choose less or equal to 0, or just less than 1 is the same thing. Or less or equal to 0. So once his hit points are down, right now we'll just be kind of boring and we'll just destroy him. But eventually you would want to add a nice explosion effect and sound and all of that. We'll just destroy him for now so we can quickly see that it's working. So now you'll see, oops, you won't see because I'm on my other screen. There we go. You'll see with enough shots, he'll disappear. And let me just reload that. And now with fewer shots of the red one, because it has more damage points, it destroys the enemy quicker.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So I think I want to, let me see here, we covered quite a bit. Oh yeah, let me very quickly show the, I'm going to switch now. I'm going to create a new project. We're going to start all over just because I want to show, oh yeah, I forgot you can have multiple projects open. Close project, there we go. Okay, so now we're back to square one. I want to quickly show some of the other behaviors and how quickly you could make a nice side-scrolling platformer game. So I'm going to create another sprite and reduce that so we're not wasting memory. This we could even make really small because this is just going to be an invisible rectangle. This is what we're going to be used to control the movement of the player character. So I set its sort of anchor point to the bottom center, and I make sure its collision is for the entire box, just a nice simple rectangle. And we're going to close that, and now I'm going to scale this to whatever makes sense relative to the screen. This is sort of the collision and control box for the platformer character. All right. So now I am going to give this, we'll call this player box, and we're going to go into its behavior and add one called platform. All right, and then now let's use, here's a really cool feature. If I double click in here, we can choose tile map. Put that down in there, and it has a cute little built-in graphic, which is not very handy but it's fine for now. So we're just going to close it, and what we just added was an actual tile map. So now there's a tile map tab here. If I click on that, I can pick any tile, and by default it's set to the little pencil, so I can draw tiles, and I can actually create just like that. So we'll pretend this color means a platform you can land on. There we go. So we'll give ourselves a hole that we can fall to our death. There we go. And yeah, so we'll make that taller. And then we'll go like this. This is fine for now. And the important thing is, for this, now we click on this little arrow. Now it tells it we're selecting and we're not drawing into the tiles. We're just selecting the entire object. So now, for the tile map, we can set a behavior for it, and we're going to make it solid. All right. So now we've got, for the player sprite itself, let me right-click on it. Right now, the tile map is so huge, I can't click on anything else because they're all in the same layer. But I can right-click, choose Z order, and send to bottom of the layer. So now I can click on the player sprite.
Oh, cool.
All right, and there's also the Z order bar, which is really handy. You can select things by clicking there, and you could very quickly adjust their Z order. So we have the player box. It has default platformer controls, which is also set to the arrow keys by default. So now if I run this, so the up arrow will jump by default, and left and right arrow move. But you'll see currently the camera is not following me, so we're going to do that. We're going to add that in a second. But again, like, it's got a really natural sense of inertia, gravity, and things like that, even using its default settings. So now we are going to simply add another behavior. This is the simplest way to do this. So we're going to choose behavior, add, and we're going to choose scroll to. So now when I run it, Now the camera is following the player.
Cool. Wow.
I can't get back up because I can't jump high enough, but anyway.
Nope.
So I would just click on the pencil, click in here. We'll add ourselves a little stair step there, and now we're good to go. So yeah, let's have some fun and just quickly add a couple more layers. So I like to, so layer 0 is the stuff, the important stuff. I like to just call that layer FG for foreground, or you could call it player layer or something like that.
Yeah.
And then this other layer, as you can see, you can just click and drag to change its Z order. All right, and then so I'm going to double click on it here. This one will be HUD. And what's important for the HUD? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is that the Z order is the window on the left there?
Yeah.
The one you're on is on layers for.
Oh, okay. So
I guess you
in the layers
I'm
palette.
confused.
Yeah. The layers palette is where you can hide and lock any particular layer and change the Z order for that whole layer.
Ah, okay.
So it's right, like, so we want the HUD layer on top of all the other layers. Obviously, you don't want
Makes sense.
the hit points and the, whatever your score. You don't want that going under the sun in the background or under behind a tree. So that's what I mean by the Z order of the layers. And then this is Z order for any particular thing in the canvas, so to speak, in this area per layer. So you'll see if I click on this, because these two things overlap each other in a sense, it'll show me both of them. It's sort of contextual. So I can adjust their Z order as I need to. But that's per sprite, per object within any given layer. And this is to change the Z order of the layers themselves.
Okay, that makes sense now.
Okay, so the HUD layer we obviously don't want to scroll. So let's just, for fun, let's just add a sprite, and we'll make this 64 by 64, and we'll just fill this with the color. We'll say this is the portrait of our character to tell us which character we have selected. All right, so we'll call it portrait. All right, so now if I run this, as you can see right from the get-go, it's not even on the screen. I have to jump up to see it, and it'll just scroll right off screen. So that would be a very annoying. We'll call that feature. So the way to fix that is click on the HUD in the layers palette here, and then go over here into its properties, and then under parallax set that to 0 and 0, and now it won't budge, and it'll always be at basically coordinate 0, 0 on your screen. So now when I run that, now you'll see it stays put.
Oh yeah.
And it's on top of everything else because of how I arranged it in Z order in the layers palette.
Very nice.
Yep. So as you can see, it very quickly you can start getting something going where you could really start to perfect your overall player size and his speed and inertia and things like that. So what I like to do for platformer, and let me save this, save project, save a single file, platformer. All right. So, oh yeah, and then like I said, what I would usually do, this is just sort of the collision box for the player. Eventually what we would do is we'd go into its properties and choose initial visibility and make that invisible. Okay. But we're not going to bother. I don't think we're going to. Oops, I must have clicked 1 accidentally, which brought it back down to its actual size. In pixels, we don't want to do that in this case. Okay, so what was I going to do from here? Okay, so one thing that's cool, I'm going to double click again, and I'm going to re-add the keyboard controls options, and I'm going to do the same thing and add gamepad support. And why not? We'll add touch support as well. So now we can control all of those things. So now I'm going to turn off in the player box's behavior where it says default controls. I'm going to turn that off. So now I think it's pretty obvious when I run this again, nothing I do on,
Yeah.
on anything. Where's my controller? There you go. So nothing I do will control anything. Because I turned off the default controls, now I have to add events to affect the controls of the character.
Right.
So I'm going to quickly create a subgroup or a group called controls. And we're going to add an event and add a keyboard event that says key is down. And we're going to click and we're going to press the right arrow. Click done. Now, while this means not if it was pressed, this means if it's being held down. Oh, this is cool. Now I need to show you global variables. So I'm going to right-click anywhere in this sort of unused portion of the event sheet and choose Add Global Variable.
Okay.
And we're going to make this one called, we'll call this right input, and we'll keep it a number. Okay, so now we have right input, and I can copy and paste this as well, I think. Yep, so now I created several, and we'll just quickly rename that to left. Don't let me keep you up for too long. If you need to go,
No, sorry.
I can.
Apologize for yawning there.
Keep in mind, everyone, it's very late. It's past midnight.
Yeah, it's 1:30 here.
1:30 in the morning where Mike is. Okay, so, and then we'll just do jump for now. So left, right, and jump. Input. And then if you want, after I cover this bit, it's up to you. I can let you go and then just sort of keep going without a person there to ask questions. But okay, so keyboard arrow is down. We're going to add to, so this is under system because we want to affect a global variable. So I click on system and I choose add to, and by default it'll be jump input. We're going to choose right input and we're adding 1. Okay, so every cycle, so it's going to be something like 60 times a second or whatever, depending on how fast the system runs. It's going to add 1 to the right input variable, and then we can copy and paste this, and then we can right click here on this specific, so I've left clicked this little condition here, keyboard right arrow is down. I right click now and I can choose invert. So now it means the opposite of that. It basically means right arrow is not down. So if that's true, we're going to get rid of this and we're going to choose, I just pressed the delete key there. We're going to choose set value of right input to 0. Alright, so now I'm just going to copy both of these, paste it, and now I'm going to double click, switch that to left arrow, done, and double click and change this to control left input. Same thing again, double click, switch this to left arrow, done, double click.
So when you hold the button down, how quickly does it repeat?
It should be anywhere from 60 to like 100 frames per second, depending on the strength of your PC.
Okay.
To get really fancy, I could get into something called delta time, but I don't want to get kind of that complicated for this walkthrough. So like you could have it based on the actual fractions of a second of the clock, so that no matter how fast the end user's computer is, or if they're playing on an Android that's pretty weak, it'll still be adding at the same speed of someone running on a very fast computer. But in this case, we don't need that level of control. We're just in general setting variables for the input, and you'll see why shortly.
But it does repeat, as opposed to just if you have it down and held down, it doesn't just stay 1 forever. Right,
exactly. And what you could do if you did want to do that is you go into the you add another condition. So add another condition, system, and then you choose trigger once while true.
Okay.
So trigger once. So if the right arrow is not held down, it's not doing anything, and then you hold it down, and then it'll go, oh, okay, so this is now true, and it adds 1 to right input, but it should stop after that very first sort of tick or loop through the events.
Okay. Yeah.
So anyway, but we don't want to do that. We want it to keep adding in this case. Not for any particular reason with what I'm going to show, but it comes in handy in the future if you do it like this. Like you could end up wanting to do stuff where some control of the character is relative to how long you're holding down a button or something.
Oh, sure.
So that's why you might want to do it like this. So anyway, I'm gonna copy this, and now we just need to do the same thing for jump. So I'm gonna switch jumping. I hate platformer games that use up to jump.
Yeah.
I love it for a fighting game like Street Fighter, but I can't stand it on a platformer game like Mario. Like it should have its own button. So we're going to do Z key to jump, and then we will change this to be jump input, and then we're going to do what am I doing? Oh, yep, Z key again, and then make sure that says jump input. Okay, so let me get these all in there under controls. Oops, cancel. So now I'm going to add another group just to keep organized, which will be called player input, and add an event. And now we're going to control the player box indirectly via these variables. So we're going to go system, compare variable, and jump input equals 1. That means someone just now pressed jump, because the next cycle it's going to be 2, so it won't keep doing it, and then if it's 0, obviously it shouldn't do anything. So
Right.
Jump input equals 1. We're going to go into the player box, and we're going to simulate control under its platform behavior. So because I added the platform behavior to the object, this whole subsection was added in by construct2 to give me control of all of that stuff. So I can choose simulate control and choose jump. And that simply now, if I run, now the Z key will make the character jump.
Cool.
All right, so go ahead if you have to interrupt or have to go.
Does the up arrow at this point still make him jump too, or?
No, because we turned off the default control, but I will.
Oh, right, I see.
So now nothing else, no up arrow, and the left and right arrow do not make him walk yet because we haven't added that part yet. But
Okay.
now again we can, all right, so let me put that there, copy and paste a few times, and then change jump input to be left input, and now we want it to be greater than 0. Done. Left input is greater than 0, and we want to simulate left. And right input is greater than 0. Then we want to simulate right. And that simply, we now have him walking again now with left and right arrow, and the Z key is now what makes it jump. So think of this is the really cool thing. Let's say you want enemies that are platform objects as well, or platformer. We want to use that same behavior to control enemies. So you do the same exact thing, where you would give it the platformer behavior, turn off its default controls, and then in the logic and the events for the enemy, instead of controlling what the enemy does based on keyboard input or touch input or a control pad, you would set it based on logic. So you would say, if you are within a certain range of the player and the player is in front of you, then walk forward, simulate pressing left or right depending on the direction. So you can set up your enemies to use the same behavior but react based on conditions like logic and basically AI instead of based on keyboard or other kinds of input. So very quickly, I'm just going to we're going to add to the HUD layer. So I'm going to lock those other layers so I can't accidentally add stuff in there or move them around if I click. So now I'm going to just double click in here, and we're going to quickly add a few sprites. And just for the sake of time, I'm not going to bother making them. I'll just shrink them down later. But so we are going to, we'll just flood fill this with any color, and we're going to just very quickly give ourselves an arrow to move to the right. There we go. Shrink that down, and then hold Control to clone it, and then double click on this one now that it's a clone. Oh wait, that's not a clone, that's a copy. Right click, clone object type. There we go. And we will, I'm just kind of going fast and sloppy just to show the logic of things instead of how to do things nice and tidy and clean, but
Sure.
I don't want to keep you up
Cool.
forever. So this will let me flip this. So now we have, I'll quickly name this to left arrow and right arrow, and one more clone object type.
Excuse me 1 second, I gotta get a hit of caffeine here. Hold on.
Alright, so we can. Oh no, that's not it. This is what we want. Okay, size 64. Oh yeah, this is 256. There we go. So
All right, I'm back.
Okay, welcome back. So this will be our jump button. Jump button. Okay, so now on our HUD, so they won't scroll, we have a left and right arrow and jump button. And so now we are going to copy these and paste them, and then starting here we're going to replace this condition. We're going to choose touch, and we're going to choose is touching object, and this is for the right arrow, so we're going to choose the right arrow. Done. And then we can copy that and paste it down here, delete that, and then right click and choose invert. So now we've got
Cool.
touch. Yeah, so in fact it'll save me a little bit of time to do it this way. So I'll paste that 3 times. So now we're doing, well, maybe that didn't save me time, it doesn't matter. Left arrow, done. Left arrow, done. Make sure this says right left input. And then left input. And then jump. Done. Jump. And make sure this both says jump. And jump. Okay, so unless I mess something up, let me quickly look at it. So we've got right arrow, set right arrow to 0 or add 1. Same thing with left, 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 left. That's good. Jump, 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 jump. Okay, so now if I run this, and I have a nice Cintiq with touchscreen capabilities, so you can't see my hand, but you can see me maybe reaching for this. Oh, if you were watching Twitch. So I can now walk left and right by touching those on-screen buttons.
Oh, cool.
I can use the keyboard. Oh, actually, it's not working for a very specific reason. I can't switch back and forth yet, but so the touch works though, and jump works. Okay, so the reason it's not working is I forgot there's a few different ways I can handle this. Basically what's happening is I have these events that are setting right input back to 0 if if
Oh.
the keyboard is not held, but I want it. So I need to. The one way I can handle this is I can consolidate all of these by doing this. So I'm going to just copy this for right arrow and paste it in here. So now both of these conditions have to be true at the same time. If you're not touching the right arrow and you're not touching the keyboard key, pressing the keyboard key for right arrow, then it will set right input to 0, and then I would just delete this one. So
Can you nest these controls, like have or combine them in different ways, like and or not or something like that, using Boolean operations? Hey, you know what I'm talking about? Like have one of these controls say if the left arrow is down and maybe or X is touching the left arrow.
Oh yeah, okay, yes. There is actually a way to add an or condition, so we can further consolidate. Like you said, that's a great question. So let me finish cleaning this up. For some reason, I have left arrow down twice there. I didn't need that. I must have done an accidental copy and paste at some point. Here we go. Okay, so left arrow. We don't need that. And now Z key. So C is for jump. Alright, so now we get rid of this. And then like you said, we could also consolidate, let's see. Okay, so we could consolidate these theoretically by right-clicking in here and make OR block. And then now if I click here, Control C, and paste this, you'll see it says OR.
Yeah.
So keyboard right arrow is down or touch input arrow. So let's see if this works. I'm going to keep these here just in case this for some reason doesn't work. But I'm going to right click and choose toggle disabled. So now you see there's a line through it.
Yeah.
So that's a way to keep code but to no longer make it actually run when you run the thing. So now I'm going to Control C to copy that, and then I'm going to click here and choose Make OR Block, and then paste that. So now it's left arrow, touching the left arrow sprite or the down key, the left arrow key is down, and going to do the same thing. So we're going to toggle disabled, and then copy this. I have to click here. That's one thing to keep in mind. If you click on a specific condition, your right-click options will be different. You have to make sure you have the entire thing selected by left-clicking over here, and then your options are different, so you can toggle or make OR block in this case. And I think now, and I have to disable this, toggle disabled, so now we're more optimized, and now I should be able to switch back and forth painlessly between controlling with the keyboard or the touchscreen. So let's see, touch still works, jump works, Z key jumps, and arrow keys jump. So
very nice.
everything is working beautifully. So now we can add that one more thing. We can, now that this is an OR block, we can insert another condition, gamepad, and this is for right. So is that under buttons? Is button down D-pad left, gamepad 0. Okay, so oops, that was right. I need to pay more attention. Double click, D-pad right, done. D-pad left, that's good. Okay, and then now we need to pick a button. Choose button A. This should reflect an Xbox 360 or Xbox One controller. So the button that says button A on it, or that has the letter A on it, should be that one. All right, and now we can do the same thing to here. We can add this for right, and right click and choose invert, and then do the same thing for left, gamepad input, and right click and invert, and button A for jumping, paste that and invert. So now I have my controller, and I am now controlling it with my controller and the A button. Works exactly how we want. Or I can switch to using my touch screen, which will be the same on a tablet device like an Android, iPhone, or as you can see, a Cintiq hooked up, or like a Microsoft Surface Pro or other Windows tablet that has touch screen or keyboard. So now you can control this game with everything. And one last cool thing about this stuff, let's save this. So as you can see, our HUD layer is called HUD. Let's there's two different ways we can do this. One thing we can do is create a new family. So let's do that. Let's create a new family called, right click, add family. We're just going to add all of the touch buttons. And okay. So there's that. They're all in the family. We're going to call it family touch buttons. So now what we can do is we can go in here and we can add an event that says touch on any touch start. So if any touch occurs, which by the way is also mouse clicks. So if you're on a computer, you can click on those buttons and it will work exactly like touches. So now we're going to add an action, and we're going to choose the touch buttons family, and we are going to go under, I think, appearance, set visible, done. So now if you touch anything on the screen, the touch screen buttons will appear, right? So now we're going to replace condition and keyboard, and do on any key pressed, on any key pressed, we're going to double click that and choose invisible. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a small dog whining in the neighboring apartment. I hope that doesn't come through on the microphone too much.
I don't hear it.
You know those little dogs that spend the whole day whining when the owner leaves for work? Yeah, unfortunately I've got one of those situations. Okay, so poor dog. Control C, Control V, and we're going to replace this. Well, replace condition. There we go. Gamepad. Let's see. I thought there was an easier way to check for any button. Oh, you know what it might be? Let me see. Gamepad. There we go. On any button. So that's a tricky thing. Some things are contextual when you're adding conditions. If you already have other conditions in that event, then you'll have less options when you try to add a new condition. So if that's happening, you can either cheat and click add a new event instead of trying to edit one. For example, now if I choose gamepad, I've got all of my options. So on any button pressed, gamepad 0, and now I can copy and paste that in, and it'll warn me some conditions were not pasted. That's because those two things kind of conflict with each other, because they're both looking for instant feedback for direct player input. So let me delete that, and I'll just drag that up there, and now that'll work. Or I could, so I could have just deleted it and then added, and I would have had the full options. But anyway, the point is, so now when I run it, we've got this nice elegant thing where it starts with the touch buttons on screen so I can use them. But if I switch to another form of input that does not need them, they get out of the way.
Oh, cool.
But then if I switch back to touch, I just touch my screen and I get my touch controls back.
Pretty slick.
Very elegant way of handling things, and as you saw, really didn't take that long and actually use this. Now we can delete, now that we know everything works, we can delete out those redundant events. So as you can see, very few events, and we have nice, elegant, full support for 3 different input modes, and it even hides the touch controls when you don't need them.
That's amazing.
So that is constructed. Oh, let's do one more thing really quickly. That'll make this just prettier. We'll do a background layer so we can really see some parallax scrolling. And let me unlock this and make sure I have background selected, and we're going to set its parallax to something much slower on the X and Y, so we'll say 30%. 30, and then I will just be very wasteful and add a big giant sprite. It could be a tile map, it's its own layer, so you can create it out of many sprites, but just for the sake of speed, we're going to make it a giant image, and I'll just stretch it, so we'll just go, let's see here, we'll pretend those are hills or something. And then shrink this down to something nice and small, add some clouds. There we go.
So while you're doing that, can you have like multiple layers of tile maps or anything like
Yes,
that?
you sure can. I'll show that quickly too, because there is one really important thing specific to Construct2 that people should know. But you'll see I've got a problem where this layer is not showing up behind the other layers, and that's
Right.
because the very first layer that was created was foreground layer, and by default when you only have one layer, it's got transparency set to no. We need to switch that to yes, and then this background layer we can turn transparency off because we don't need that. So that's why that had happened. So I'll just stretch that out, and now we have a back layer that will scroll at a different speed. The farthest back layer I usually set to no parallax at all, like 0%, and that would just be the sky with like clouds looping by.
Yeah.
But because for the sake of time, I'll just stretch this out bigger, so that we can see the parallax work. Like I would have a mid layer basically that would have hills that are a little closer up or things like that. So anyway, so here we go. I'm going to quickly save that and run the layout. And now you'll see we have parallax
Yeah,
scrolling,
that's nice.
silky smooth.
Very nice.
All right. So let's see. What was the question you asked very recently? That was layers, multiple layers with
multiple
tile maps.
maps. Yeah.
Yes. So on any layer, that layer is locked. So we can let's add a mid layer, and I think now I'm at the maximum of layers for the free version of Construct2. So I'll limit myself to 4. Just like I think it's 4 for the free version, just in case people are copying along with everything that we're doing here. And we're going to call this layer mid layer. And now that I have mid layer unlocked and all the others locked, if I double click, I can choose, as you can see, tile map.
Yep.
Click down in there, it gives me the same. I'm going to choose rectangle, and set the alpha to something like 50, pick a blue color, and just drag over that a few times to sort of blue out this tile map so we can see the difference. I'm going to click the pencil here, and I'm just going to draw some background stuff in tiles. So we'll have a mid layer scrolling at a mid speed made out of tiles, which obviously is much more optimized than making it out of giant image sprites stretched out all over the place. Alright, so there's that, and then mid, I'll make sure I click on the mid in the layer palette here so that its properties come up, and I set its parallax to something like 50. Oops, not 509. That would not be good. All right, so now I'm going to run that. And I've got 3-layer parallax.
Oh, nice. Look at that.
Front HUD layer. There we go. And so one thing that I did not mention that is really important, which is, I mean, as you can see, Construct 2 is an absolutely fantastic program for very quickly either prototyping a game or making an actual polished 2D game that you can export to a lot of different platforms. In fact, the Construct 3, if I recall, I don't own it yet, so I haven't used it, but last I knew, they offer their own online wrapper compiling service. So if you own Construct 3, Construct 3 runs in the browser, typically Chrome, and then like anytime you want to actually make your builds of the game to the different platforms, you just basically tell the browser to send your game to their online compiling service, and then it'll spit the files back out at you, or you could give you download links for them so that you could then test them or install them on your phones or so it makes it very painless.
Yes.
All right, so let's see. Or in the case like I have, let me show you actually. Let's see. So file. Oh no, not file. Let's see. What do I want? Home export project. You can see we have options for a lot of things. HTML5 website, Chrome Web Store, Scara Arcade, Congregate, Cordova, BlackBerry, Tizen, Amazon App Store, Windows Store. This one is really cool. This is the one that allows you to very quickly make separate, like it creates, let's see, Linux 32, Linux 64-bit, Windows 64-bit, Windows 32-bit, and Mac OS. It'll create all of those runtimes all at once for you. So click this. It's based on Node WebKit, I think it's called. So click next, and then it asks you where you want to export it to. So I'll just export it directly. Yeah, new project is fine. It gives you a few other options, which are in this case not worth getting into. Click export. Export process begins. This shouldn't take too long. It's not a very big project at the moment.
All right.
Open destination folder. So here we have it, as you can see.
Oh, wow,
Windows
cool.
and Linux, and the only one that'll work here, obviously, is the 32 or 64-bit versions. And then the executable. So I double-click that. Oh, and by the way, you can change the loading screen to be whatever you want, so you don't have, or at least for the full version. The free version, it might not give you that option. It might always show the Construct 2 logo when you're loading it up. But anyway, I can maximize it. I can... So there's the executable version.
Very nice.
And it works with, so everything we just did, touchscreen, controller. So very handy. So there's that. I don't want to keep you forever. I know it's really late there. Did you want to sign off? And what I was planning on doing, and I won't last long because I haven't slept much either, is just actually work on one of the projects I have going, and sort of, so we can sort of, now that you understand the basics of how it works, I could start adding additional features to a game engine that's already far along, so you can see. But seriously, if you need to go get some sleep, just. I'd like to see this project you're working on. Okay. I may have to sign off in 5-10 minutes. So, 1 moment, please. All right. So. So this is a platformer game engine, very, very similar to Super Mario, And these are all of the events so far. Oh, yeah, that's another cool thing that I should explain. If you go into projects, in your event sheets, one thing that's really cool, you'll see here I have separate event sheets for inputs, another one for level events in general, one for Spriter events, so Spriter animations made with that modular animation program that my company makes and sells. You can create Spriter animated characters and import them into Construct2 and actually control those animations on the fly. So you'll see soon the player character here, and he's a Spriter character instead of a standard sprite. So everything is tweened, so the smoothness of the animation depends entirely on how fast the platform that the game is running on can run. So if the platform can handle 100 frames per second, it'll animate at 100 frames per second very smoothly. So the cool thing is, so if we go to boss events, you'll see I can include level events to that event sheet. So this means for special levels that include bosses, like you'll see here, level 3 has a boss. That's this big purple guy here. Yeah. You'll see under event sheets, it uses the boss events, right? Yeah. But the boss event sheet also includes the level event sheet as well. And then if I click on level events, that also includes Spriter events, input events, and fade out events. So you can be very, very organized. You could split up your event sheets into specific parts of logic that you want to share globally. Like inputs and fade in and out, I want in every frame or level across the game. Yeah. So I have those as separate event sheets that I can then include into any specific event sheet. And then, this is also important. I had mentioned that you can make layers global. So if you look here in level 1, which was the first level I edited, and go into the layers, I have a touch layer, and I have a HUD layer. And if I click on them to see their properties, you can see, HUD I didn't do yet. It's global, it's not set, but it should be. But for touch I did set it to global. So you'll see right there. Let's see what happens if after the fact, if I turn the HUD layer to global. Let's see what happens. HUD, global, yes. Alright, so now let me look at level 2, see if that has a layer called HUD. It does. Yeah, so now it's universal. So if I edit it on the original level layout, then it will update on all of the other layouts where it has a layer called HUD. Cool. So anyway, so there's that. And let me just quickly run the whole game.
Did I just see in the event screen that those yellow lines were comments or something like that?
Yes. Oh yeah, that's definitely handy, especially if you're a good programmer. You want to comment a lot.
Yeah, right.
So yes, so anywhere I can right-click and choose. Let's see, how do I do this? Add comment. There we go.
Ah, yes. Okay.
And put that in.
Very neat.
By default, it's that yellow. And I don't know if you can edit how it looks. I'm not positive. I've never bothered trying. Edit. No, I can edit the text, but it doesn't look like I can change how it looks. But anyway, very handy. Keep things organized. Cool. And yeah, so now I have the game running on the screen. Just like I just showed you, I have I have it set up to respond to input from the controller, the keyboard, or the. So as you can see, just like Mario, I can jump on enemies. There's a power-up, which is this red jelly bean. I can get, and you can see, like, this is still a work in progress, so I've got weird things going here where, like, the foreground is not finished and is
in front of everything, all the action.
and you see I have two buttons, two touch buttons, one for throwing my weapon that I picked up and one for jumping. And I can switch back to keyboard, which I have mapped to the Z and the X key. And if I touch my screen, the touch controls come back, just like what we just did. And you'll see the character animates very smoothly. That's using spriter object. And let's get to the boss. That's these. Oh yeah, and here's an auto scrolling layer, or level, I should say. If I hold down the button when I bounce off of an enemy, I'll bounce higher and he'll do a flip, as opposed to the standard, I'm dead. I got carried away showing you the difference between how you can bounce either holding the button or not, and forgot that if I did a small bounce there, I would fall to my death. So anyway, I'll keep it with the high bounces, and I can land on these moving platforms, which is incredibly easy to add. I'll show that quickly in a second. But okay, so we're going to get to the end of this level in a moment. So obviously I'm not going to go through all of the events and behaviors and stuff for all of this right now, but just to show you. So it's a pretty robust look. You'll see if the flying versions of these enemies. Oh, and the enemies respawn after a few seconds, which is great for testing. And it's just a variable you can set that decides how long they take to respawn. But you'll see that flying version of the enemy, if I bounce off of him, he turns into the regular version and falls.
He does. Cool.
So anyway, we're going to get to the boss in a second here. And so the boss, that's the old version. That's not a spriter object. He's a regular sprite. So right now, because it's a work in progress, you'll see when I get to a certain distance, the actual new spriter version that's replacing this old version comes onto the screen.
Oh, wow.
And so I've just started working on his AI, sort of recoding the old version to now use the spriter version for everything. So I can bounce off of him, I can shoot him. I can't, well, if I have the weapon, I can make him die. But right now he doesn't turn around yet, if you're behind him. And he can't hurt you currently.
That's convenient.
Yeah. Great for testing.
Yes, right.
Oops. Yeah, I'll just bounce on him a few times and he'll die. There, the old version died, and then the game tells you won.
Yeah,
So,
alright. Congratulations.
Thanks. Okay, so let's see, what did I want to go into here? So yeah, so as you can see, I have a lot more layers of for scrolling and for the touch and HUD separately. I'm using a much prettier, more appropriate tile set for the environment. Oh yeah, this is something really important that I did want to mention, and then I forgot, is, so I'm going to lock that and go into the foreground. And you'll see I have this tile map for the foreground, but this is super important. In Construct 2, at least last I know, I think this is still the case, if you set your tile map object to be solid, every tile you place will be treated as solid. So you can this is really cool, you can double click on any of your tiles. For example, these angled tiles here, you'll see I carefully set its collision to match what the player should be able to walk on. But the problem is, what about tiles like this that are on top where you shouldn't be able to touch it at all, right?
Right.
You can't completely get rid of, like you can bring it down to 3 vertices, you can make it very small, but that's going to cause all kinds of weirdness. Right? So what you can do though is you can create another layer. So I have foreground and I have foreground no collide tiles, and I have a second tile set lined up with it. So you'll see if I hide this layer, all of the tiles that you should not collide with are actually being drawn on the other layer, on the other tile object. But it uses the same image. And then so I can draw that. I was missing a tile there. I can draw that in. But wait a minute, I think I'm still drawing into the wrong thing. Hold on, let me undo. Make sure I have this tile map selected. Go on the pencil. Yeah, there we go. That's fine. Okay. So, but anyway, yeah, that's something really important. If you have tiles that you want no collision to happen with, but they still have graphical information, then the best solution I came up with is to have another layer behind that layer where you have a clone of that tile object set to not be a solid object. And you just make sure both of those layers are scrolling at the exact same speed. So obviously in this case 100 for X and Y parallax, and that solves that problem for you.
I think that's a pretty common technique.
Right, I'm sure it is. Like obviously for the person creating the level, it would be very convenient if you could just, set your collisions and like right click on a tile and tell it if it's collidable or not before you start editing. Like that would be ideal. And then you just draw and it's properly setting each particular tile. But that might be much less optimized. Like that might negatively impact the frame rate if it has to sort of loop through and check the specific whether or not each tile is collidable at all. But I don't know why that decision was made. It may have just been for the sake of quickly implementing otherwise very nice tile support.
Well, I assume that would make it difficult to make something like Sonic clone or something where you can go underneath other levels, where you've got
right. Yeah.
Like if you had a tunnel or something in this map underneath where you currently are, that'd be difficult to do if everything was solid.
Right, and if everything was on only one layer, so you can, like in this case, we could have one tile map object that's on top of the player and one that's behind, so we can have really nice effects where you're like, Sonic gets partially obscured going behind certain parts of the background and things like that, like into a cave.
Right.
Things like that. So it's not a big deal. It's just something you have to know and prepare for. And obviously, if you're using the free version of Construct 2, you only have four layers total to work with. So you have to use up a whole layer if you want to do it this way. You could do it both on the same layer, but then you would end up with annoying Z order. I can't click on the one I want. You would have to use the Z order panel, bring that one to the top again, and then edit it, and then put it back down where it belongs in Z order behind the. You know what I mean? Like,
I think so. Yeah.
A little more. It's definitely doable. It's just a little more time consuming. If you buy the full version of Construct 2, you can add infinite layers. So obviously you don't want to do that for the sake of how well your game's going to run if you have a lot of different things on each layer. But so there's a lot of things I didn't get into, which is some really cool stuff you can do on the fly, zooming in and out of the entire screen. Which is just beautiful. It runs really well, silky smooth. So like in another platformer game engine I made, there were giant mushrooms that were like trampolines, and if you bounced off of them, I had variables set up for each mushroom that would tell it what the resulting X and Y inertia will be for the player if they bounce off. So different mushrooms were set on different angles. So if you bounced off of it, it would send you flying in any particular direction that I set. And the intensity of the bounce. So some of them would send you flying really far. And I added this really cool thing called zoom factor. So as soon as you bounced off, not only would those variables in that particular mushroom tell the game in what direction and how fast you should be bounced, but it would also tell it to smoothly but quickly zoom out or zoom in. So if it was bouncing you really far, the camera would pan back a lot, nice and smoothly, so you're not like stuck at the edge of the screen having no idea where you're being launched. it would actually pan out, so now your character on screen is very small, and you can see the entire level in some cases, or a giant chunk of the entire level, so you see where the heck you're going.
That sounds really cool.
So yeah, so that's something I'll maybe get into in a future stream or video.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's get into adding one last actual thing I need to add to the game, and then I think I'll end the stream for both of us, so we can get some sleep. But as you can see, we have this player character. Okay, so we have this player character, and one thing I don't like, which is very minor, but when he lands, there's no like little dust cloud that comes up.
Okay.
So that's just intolerable as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, it is.
Inexcusable.
Yeah.
Such mediocrity will not be tolerated. So
Yeah, I know, right?
So I'm going to add an object. Just double click. I'm in the foreground layer. Not that that matters too much right now. And it's just going to be a regular sprite. Click in there, and I'm going to load. And I'm just going to fish around in my file directory for a second here off screen. Let's see. Download. Where is it? Where's the elevator music when you need it? Oh, I do this.
Yeah, right? We should.
Then we'll have that name 2 hours later.
Yeah, we should. Should get some kind of contract with Muzak or something.
Exactly. By the way, anyone that ends up watching the stream, I really would like to get a collection of either royalty-free music or music that I have permission from the creator to use during my streams. Especially chip music or Amiga music would be awesome. Stuff that fits a general retro and video game theme would be really cool. So if you're a musician and you want to have me play your music in the background when I stream, please contact me and hook me up with your music files. All right, so I can't do two things at once. Sorry about that. So I'm still looking. So there we go. I'm almost done finding the. I'm just looking for an image file.
Okay.
Here we go. Okay, so this is just a single sort of dust cloud image, and as you can see, it's needlessly large at first. But if you remember, when it spawns, it will spawn at the size that the first initial version of it is.
Yeah.
Call this dust cloud. All right. So now we're going to give it a couple of behaviors. And so we're going to add that, and we will give it a bullet behavior. And we are also going to give it a fade behavior. And that is it, actually. So, or for now, that's it. So, speed, that's probably way too fast, but I don't know. We'll just make it 100 for now. And set angle, leave to yes. Initial state, yes. That's fine. Yeah, that's all good for now. And then active start, yes. Fade in time 0, that's good. Wait time. So we're going to give it a 0.5 second, so a half a second wait time. So that means it'll be completely opaque for the first half a second. And then we're going to give it a half a second fade out time. And then destroy, by default, it's after fade out. So automatically, as soon as one of these is created, it's going to wait a half a second. And then for the period of a half a second, it's going to smoothly fade out its opacity. And then automatically destroy it when it's done.
All right, makes sense.
It's really handy for particle effects and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's that. So now what we need to do, I'm going to add one more behavior, which is that good old sign behavior. But this isn't going to be for movement this time, which is interesting. This is going to be for its overall size. So let's see. I think this setting will be fine for now. This should probably be, I think period is in seconds. Yes, so we will make this happen over a 1.1 period. Oh no, actually, let's make it a 2.2. So 2.2 seconds, it'll get bigger and then get back to its original size or smaller. I forget how it works. But the point is, we don't want it to finish the sine wave. We want it to get bigger as it fades out and then disappear, so it'll never get a chance to get smaller again.
All right.
So we're just using one of its built-in behaviors to sort of cheat and make this image enlarge over time after it appears and then fade out as it's enlarging. So now we can, I'm in the level editor for level 1. I've added this dust cloud sprite, and now I'm holding control and pressing E, and that brings me to the event sheet for that particular level. So, which is what we needed in this case. It's just the standard level events. So now I'm going to just, there's a logical place for me to put this. Oh, one thing to show you very quickly. If I go into events, there's these tabs here, home, view, and events. Yeah. View is really handy when you're in the layouts, like level 1, because this will allow me to do things like toggle on and off the different bars that are specific to a layout. And then you can even turn on grids and snapping and stuff like that, which is really handy. But for events, what you can do, let me go back into the events editor, is there's a search. So for example, if I know like a keyword, I think it's land. So there's no event with land yet, but there's what do you call it, comments. Let's see. But that's a fast way. If I was debugging something like for the player shot when he throws his projectile, then I can filter out any of the events that have something to do with the shot. So that really helps.
That is handy.
Yeah. And then, so anyway, I'll add it to the bottom for now. So what we're going to do is, this is the player box, just like with that quick demo I made for you earlier. And we're going to double click on that, and in its platform movement, we're going to choose platform animation triggers on landed. So this says, as soon as this lands under any circumstance, right?
Yeah.
So now we're going to add an action, which is going to tell this same thing to spawn. And remember, I put its sort of anchor point down at the bottom center of basically the character's feet.
Yeah.
So we are going to spawn another object, and it is going to be the dust cloud. And in here I can also, by default, this little search is active, so I can just type dust. Oh, I forgot I already had some boss dust cloud, but those are built into the spriter. It's a long story, but anyway, so dust cloud, that's good. We're gonna spawn it on the foreground layer, and at image point 1, that's fine, so done. So it'll already be working if I run it to some extent, but I think it will shoot out from, there we go. As you can see, it shoots out from it goes from left to right.
Yeah.
So what we need to do is, we're going to, after we spawn it, we're going to set its angle of movement. But before that, in order to figure out what the angle should be, I'm going to sort of cheat and go back to the level layout. And you'll see I have this little, there's its anchor point based on the image. And I can rotate it. So if I want to figure out the angle of movement, oh yeah, that's another thing I need to do actually, I forgot. I have set angle turned on. And by default, as you saw, the movement was from left to right. So I should rotate this image so that the image is also facing from left to right. So, okay, so there's that. And now, all right, so I'm going to make 1, 1. Hold on a second, because now it's distorted. And then scale it back down. So that's the size it'll start at. Okay, so now I can carefully, so I just set its angle, which you'll see in its properties. Where is its angle? Angle. So up at the top under common, angle, I can even copy this to paste it later. 321, blah, blah, blah. So there's that. So I'm going to undo its angle I just set and Control E to go in there. So after it is spawned, I'm going to find the dust cloud, make sure I'm affecting the right one. Under its bullet speed, I'm going to set its angle of motion, and then I'm going to paste that in there.
Okay.
Right? So, but I want to do this, I want two of them. So, so I copied both of those actions and pasted again, and then I'm going to set the second one to a different angle.
Okay.
So go back here, and just to see what the angles should be something roughly like this. Obviously I could use sort of math to figure this out as well, but I'm an artist, I don't like using math.
Yeah.
Alright, so let's see what that does now. There we go. It's exaggerated, but it really gets the point across. Like obviously I would just tweak the how big it gets, its size, tweak its fade in and fade out. So
Yeah.
I'll just do that
Cool.
very quickly. But so I'll just go back and but yeah, don't forget, feel free to so its initial size will start smaller, and then its sine wave will be a longer period because I noticed it was starting to get small again. So we'll make this a little longer, and then let's see. Oh yes, and it was getting too big, so that magnitude we need to turn down quite a bit. So we'll make that something like 20. And then it was traveling too far, so we'll make its movement speed slower. So now we'll run it again. And that's definitely better. It's still a little too big, but you get the idea.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. I like it.
Yeah, it should be like half that size and twice as fast. But obviously I know that now, so I can set those numbers very quickly to make it exactly how it should be. And you'll see now every time he lands, we get that effect now.
That's cool. I like it.
But anyway, I think on a future stream, maybe even my next stream, I'll just pick up where I left off here and continue to. I'll show how I can control spriter objects in here, and then in doing so, I'll also either finish fixing that boss that's currently halfway between replacing the boss with the spriter object. So that'll really get into detail on the really cool stuff you can do with spriter objects in Construct 2. I can trigger sound effects. I have variables that can be set and even tweaked within spriter. So I can set hit points, I can set triggers to make the enemy jump in the game based on when an animation starts. So for the boss,
Cool.
there's a jumping animation, a jump start animation, where he crouches down for a split second and then jumps. And I actually set the trigger in the timeline so that the in-game boss character actually jumps at the exact second in the animation when he should actually start jumping, physics-wise. And so all kind. Oh, and collision boxes. So I can do an animation where the boss does like a big swooping. Sorry if that made noise when I just knocked the microphone. But so like he could do a big, double, attack. Swinging his arms down, and I can actually set any number of collision rectangles that can be scaled and rotated on the fly, and even those collision rectangles I add in Spriter can have their own variables telling, and those variables can tween. So imagine you have a punch attack, right? So not only can the collision box for the punch attack scale and stretch and change its size, for every frame of the animation and tween itself so that the collision is really perfect, but also the actual amount of damage that punch will do can change on the fly based on what time of the animation. So obviously if someone is just starting to punch, it's not going to be very effective. It's not going to hurt very much if you step into a punch that's not at its zenith yet of movement. And then obviously at the end of the punch, where almost all of the inertia is gone again, it would again do very, very little damage. So you can actually have that right in Spriter, very visually. You can set not only the collision box for where the collisions occur, but have very careful settings for how much damage during every fraction of a second of the attack,
Wow.
how much damage it does. So
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, some really cool stuff you can do. Oh, and I'm also setting up for the boss. His AI is like 90% set up in Spriter. So I set these variables for every animation that tell it which animation it should play next as soon as it's done. So every time the enemy lands, he has to go back to the idle animation.
Yeah.
So I simply have a land animation, and then I have a variable called next anim that I have set to idle. So automatically in Construct 2, it'll just... I have one event that says when any animation finishes, if the variable next animation is set to any text string, then switch to that particular animation based on that text string. That would be the name of the animation. But then I added this other cool thing where I created 5 variables, 5 slots, so to speak, in Spriter that are random animation. So during the idle animation, there are 5 potential animations set. One would be going to jump, the other would be fireball attack, the other would be whatever, a laugh, for example. So I have one event code that says during any animation, if any of these random variables are set to a string, then so it says every so many fractions of a second, check if these variables have any data in them, and if so, set a random number from 1 to 5, and then pick the name of the animation from that particular random animation slot and do that particular animation. So all within Spriter in one event in Construct 2, I have my boss, when he lands, he goes into idle. When he's idling every fraction of a second, he randomly chooses to do one of 5 things.
Oh, cool.
And so you can do very, very nice AI and like I said, triggering things. I have a very specific trigger when the boss... Let me go back to the boss very quickly. I'll cheat and just skip immediately to the boss frame. So anyway, this is the last thing, and then I'm going to end the stream. So I'm just going to get quickly to the boss, and you'll see when the boss actually comes in and lands, the Spriter version, when I get close enough, the screen will shake, and it'll play a sound, and those are both triggers built right into the animation. So you saw that the screen shakes. That was a trigger within Spriter. They're called event triggers. So exactly at the moment in that animation when he hits the ground, it plays a sound and it shakes the screen, and it shakes the screen set to a variable that I call Quake within the Spriter file. So different moves. So I could have him, like when he does that overhead sort of punch attack, when his fists hit the ground, I can make the screen shake a tiny bit. And then, in the other thing, like the stomp, I have the screen shake more violently. So anyway, really cool stuff. I'll get into that in much more detail in an upcoming stream as I actually work on finishing fixing up this boss and making it full Spriter control.
I look forward to that one. That'll be good.
Yeah, so if you have any... I'm glad you like this. I had no idea. I just asked you because you're a great person to have a conversation with and have intelligent questions. So I'm glad you have interest in this, and I would love to have you back if you want to continue to learn more and see the progress of this particular project. So one last thing I'll mention for everyone watching that's interested in this. When I am done with this engine, what I'm going to do is release at first 2 versions of it. One version that's going to look exactly like this finished project with the product with this really pretty art in it, and it's going to have a lot more of this pretty art in it. And it's going to be royalty-free art. The engine will be royalty-free, and there are 2 versions. The one version that you can buy that'll have all of this pretty artwork in it with a large variety of levels and objects and enemies. But then the other version will be, like, the art will be replaced out with more sort of placeholder, non-detailed art, but the engine will be exactly the same, just ready for you to add your own art. And that version will be free with the purchase of Spriter Pro. So anyone that buys Spriter, or anyone that already did, they'll get a download link where they can get this full platformer game engine for free, and they can use
Awesome.
it for commercial games or anything like that. And then, like I said, if they want, if you're not an artist or don't have the time to make all the art, or just want something pretty to look at while you're making your game work, then you can buy the version that has all of the art ready to go and ready to use. I made a tutorial video in the past for Spriter, which shows how easily you can take a Spriter project like the character animation here and simply repaint, paint over, or recreate from scratch totally new versions of a few character head images, body part images, and then you've got a completely custom character now for your game. So even someone that's not too artistically inclined can do a pretty good job painting over. Oh, someone just subscribed.
Indeed.
Cool.
All right.
But that's it. I will let you go and get some sleep, and I will get some more sleep.
Yes. Sounds good, man. Well, I appreciate you having me on again. It was really interesting learning about Construct 2, and look forward to the next stream about it. Hopefully I'll be able to chat with you on that one too, or in the future.
We can definitely synchronize it, so the next time you're available, that's the stream I will do. I have another stream potentially lined up, because it evolved from, but don't say who yet, but here's a little clue for everyone else that's watching. It'll be Amiga related, and peut-être pour la première chaque seconde, je vais parler comme ça. Maybe I'll be speaking like that for the first few seconds of the next stream, just as a sign of respect for the guest. But anyway, that's it. I will let you go. Thanks again for helping. I would love to have you back and get deeper into this project.
Great. Look forward to it.
Okay, and that's it, everyone. I'm going to sign off.
All right. Later.
Have a great rest of your day, or get some sleep.
You too.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to you later.